You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game. And we will be doing, well, a fair amount of politics, but a lot of public policy, because we have as our guest David Greising, who's the newly minted president and CEO of the BGA, the Better Government Association. We're taping in the offices of the Better Government Association here just across from the Willis Tower. And just briefly about our guests, it seems like your entire professional career in journalism, right?
Yeah, I just spent 1 year out of journalism. I worked as a consultant for World Business Chicago, the economic development agency. But yeah,
been all over Sun-Times, Tribune, Reuters, correspondent, columnist, management side, Chicago Cooperative, News Cooperative,
right.
And now you're at the BGA.
Right, right. Well, I think it's a logical extension of my career. The Chicago News Cooperative was a not-for-profit, which the BGA is a not-for-profit. Growing out of doing a lot of investigative journalism in the course of my reporting and editing career, that's the main core competency we have here is investigative work.
So people might know Andy Shaw was there. He is still at the BGA, but he's no longer day-to-day operations. That is Mr. Greising, right?
That's right.
Is he emeritus? What do we give him?
He's
his title?
President Emeritus.
President Emeritus.
Very good,
okay.
Jeff. Yeah.
Okay.
Andy's still with us. He's out working with our donors. Andy came here almost a decade ago and quintupled the staff during the time he was here. He's really been phenomenal in growing this organization.
So it's about 20 professionals or so?
Yeah, a little more than that.
A little more?
We're almost 100 years old. We started the
$3 million budget.
A bit more than that even, yeah.
$4 million maybe.
Right.
Andy took it for like $4 to $4 million. Something like
Basically,
that. No
yeah.
pressure on you. No pressure at all, Dave.
No, he's a hard act to follow. He's a hard act to follow.
Okay, so Andy taught me this: investigate, educate, litigate, advocate, communicate. Right?
Yep.
So what could be? So if you wanted to educate, if you wanted to communicate, what could be more important than the governor's race in the fall of 2018?
I think it is. There are a few things more important. It's a real watershed moment for the state of Illinois. Pretty stark contrast in the political views of the two candidates, and a lot on the line. Illinois' finances are deeply troubled, and the ability of either of these candidates to make any serious impact on that problem will determine kind of the future of this state.
Yeah, and so the thing of it is, so we just came out of a primary. We're taping this on April 12th, so primary about 22 days or so ago.
Right.
And some might say it was somewhat not too satisfying in terms, if you were a political junkie and you wanted to see major discussion of public policy, like the budget, for instance, like what's happened to the budget in the last 3 years, and what's happened to revenue, and have there been any reforms? What would you say, like 0% discussion of that?
Not quite 0%. The one piece of substantive discussion that I noticed was Daniel Biss, who kind of made a name for himself in wonking out on the pension crisis in Illinois, and was party to some decent proposals for fixing the problem, ended up apologizing for some of the work he did because it was politically unpopular with the Democratic vote.
It may have cost him the nomination.
It could well have.
The unions were not too happy with Mr. Biss.
They were not. He did better than most people expected.
He did. Right.
That whole middle class thing.
He came in second
worked
place.
well for him. He came in second place.
He beat Chris Kennedy, the famous Kennedy name, Sir Lancelot, Camelot, all of that stuff. It was just like Daniel Biss edged them out for number two. But really, what were they both, like 18, 19% behind J.B. Pritzker, right?
J.B. Pritzker was, neither one of them came close to touching Pritzker. He had a huge money advantage.
And why, David?
Well, he had a huge money advantage. He was able to just carpet the airwaves. Although, when you look at it, in the last 3 to 4 weeks of the campaign, Biss had a pretty strong presence on television.
He did.
And because there was a sense that Biss might just pull it off, It reminded some people of the way that Harold Washington split the difference between Rich Daley and Jane Byrne during the 1982 mayoral primary. It looked like this could possibly thread the needle if Kennedy did well enough, but frankly, Kennedy didn't take away enough
Well, but still,
Pritzker votes
but if
to give him a
Kennedy did
chance.
much better and Biss didn't, Kennedy would have beat Biss.
Right,
So,
that's a good
so
point.
really, you had to, well, that's over. Because right now, we just look forward, right? That's what journalists do. We look at forward. We let the historians and those guys at the University of Chicago deal with history, right?
Yeah.
We're not over there in Hyde Park. We're down in the loop where the rubber hits the road, right?
Right, absolutely.
So, okay, so April, we got about 7 months. Why don't we think of somebody who could sort of encourage Governor Rauner, J.B. Pritzker, of course, the nominee in the Democratic Party, Rauner, the nominee in the Republican Party, to have maybe 10 discussions. Because we don't want so much a debate. We'd like to see them talk about the key issues, right?
Right.
So Mr. Greising doesn't realize, but he's consented to model the behavior. How's that?
Well,
Can we model the
your
behavior?
idea is interesting. Maybe you could go to all the old Lincoln Douglas debate sites and pick a topic at each one. I don't know if you could get a modern day politician to engage in a single topic for the length of a typical debate. It seems that politics has gotten to the point that kind of superficial talking points have overshadowed any taste
I
of
got a
substance.
secret weapon. Okay,
What is it?
I got, like, in my hip pocket, I got Andy Shaw and David Greising, the two most influential people. And I'm not kidding. And they represent the BGA. If you, David Greising, newly minted CEO, president of the BGA, the Better Government Association, and Andy Shaw, president CEO emeritus, and let Berkowitz just like a tag along, like hold your coat or something, okay? And we go over to Governor Rauner and said, look, it's for the good of the state. Could you agree to maybe 10 or so discussions? We'll figure it out how to make it very balanced and very thoughtful. Would you sign up? He's got to say yes, right? Okay, don't even have to answer. I'm sure he would say yes. And we say the same thing to J.B. Pritzker. He's got to say yes. Okay, it's done. So why don't we just start modeling the behavior?
Okay, let's do that.
So,
Let's do that.
So they had this. The scene is the budget. Okay, we had a budget for fiscal year 2015. The formula for that is fiscal year 2015 means it ended in June 2015. Fiscal year 2017 means it ends in June of 2017, right?
2017 ends in June of 20. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
right. Correct.
So
Yes.
we're now in April of 2017. We're finishing fiscal 2017, and the governor has proposed in February fiscal 2018, right?
I think we're ending fiscal 18 and on our way to fiscal 19.
Did I just
Yes.
say, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah, yes, because that's right. Fiscal 18, yes. I forgot what year we're in. We're in 18. Thank you for the correction. Sometimes I'm like too.
I wanted to be timid in case you were right, but
We figured it out. This
Okay,
year
good.
it is April 12th, 2018. Okay, so we're just finishing fiscal 2018. And the budget that was just proposed in February of this year and is being worked on, and they would hope they'd get it done by June, would be fiscal 19, because
correct.
that'll go from June 2018 to 19. Okay, so the short of it is, for the years for which we had no budget until it was agreed in July 2017, which was basically the end of fiscal 17.
Fiscal 17, right.
That was sort of hammered out by a $5 billion tax increase, which the governor opposed, and he vetoed, but it was overridden. So we basically, though, until then, for the 2 years, we were spending at about $38 billion a year. We won't go into the details why. We're bringing in revenue of about $32 billion for another show. So we had deficits of about $6 billion a year. We had bills accumulating after paying them down to about $12 billion a year. So the scene is we have these bills, $12 billion. Maybe we've bonded out $6 billion, maybe we haven't. A detail, okay? The main thing is, now we've got this budget that's running at about $38 billion. And it may be out of whack $1 billion, but you know, as Ev Dirksen said a long time ago, $1 billion here, $1 billion there, before you know it, you're talking real money. But I mean, $1 billion is not that much, right?
I view $1 billion as a lot of money.
But I mean, when we've had deficits of like $6 billion a year, it's not good to have a deficit. But if it's only $1 billion, we want to put it in perspective, right?
Partly, the number of $1 billion obviously is a matter of some debate, depending on
could be
which
more.
numbers you're looking at. A lot of people believe it's more than that. And on top of that,
Okay.
one of the ways that number stays as small as it does is by not paying current bills, which is, you need to factor in the fact that
We'll come back. That's discussion number 2.
at the height of the budget impasse, the unpaid bills had grown to about almost $16 billion. So that
It had
starts
grown
to
too
add up
much?
to a lot of money.
16 billion, right.
Yeah,
No,
16 billion.
right. And then it went down, then went up. You could do almost a whole show on that. Not a whole show, but 10 minutes. And I've squandered some of our time already. So maybe we've got like 18 minutes left or so. So let's go right to it. We got this budget. And roughly, to give people an idea, the general revenue fund is really the budget to look at. And that's running about $38 billion in spending, roughly that in revenue. And it's allocated what? The 3 big drivers are?
In general revenue spending?
Yeah.
Schools are
Education.
big, education, pensions are huge.
Big, and?
And I'm forgetting what the third is.
Medicaid.
Oh, right. Sorry,
Okay,
Medicaid.
that's fine. Okay, so those are the 3 things. If you really want to do something about the budget, that's about 70% of the budget.
Right.
It's about, you average it out 10, 10, 10, one's a little more, one's a little, that's $30 billion or so. I mean, so if you don't mess with that, you're not going to affect the budget much. Maybe you don't want to. So roughly the percentages, K through 12, about 21% of the budget, higher education, about 5%, pensions, 22%, Medicaid, 19%. You add it up, you're pushing 70%. State employee health care, another 5%. Human services, 16%. Public safety, 5%. And that is it. You got debt services and a few things. So you can see where the money is. What was it Dillinger said, why do we rob banks? Because that's where the money
That's
is.
where the money is, right.
So the same thing here. So, so tell me, David, it's year at the BGA, year for better government, right?
Right.
Do those numbers sound right? Does that sound about the right proportion? Forget the magnitude. Are we like doing it right in terms of pensions and education and Medicaid gobbling up 70% of the budget?
That's what the budget is. Is it right? Seems like education is a really high priority for people. So spending on education is generally considered a qualitative good. The pension spending, we've seen the cost of not funding the pensions adequately. And if your question is, are we spending too much on pensions? A lot of people might say so, but there's kind of 2 challenges there. One is those pensions were agreed to over the course of many years, and efforts to try to change them typically run afoul of a constitutional prohibition against diminishing or impairing pension benefits.
But there's this saying, if you're digging a hole, what's the first thing you do? If you're stuck and you're in a hole, and partly because you've been digging and the hole's
Right.
getting deeper,
Right.
what's the first thing to fixing your problem?
If you don't want to go deeper, you should probably stop
digging.
Okay.
So if 3 years ago, the governor had come in, not to blame him, but if 3 years ago, Rauner had said, first thing we got to do is go completely for new employees, not tier 3, not vague. Every new employee will go into a 401k defined contribution type thing, which they have in corporations, push for legislation, travel across the state, take out ads. Did he do that?
No, he did not do that. Correct.
Okay.
He did. There was rhetoric about it during the campaign.
Rhetoric.
we've seen in this governor sometimes a lack of commitment to actually trying to implement some of his proposals, so his turnaround agenda. That's partly a recognition on his part of the political reality that trying to impose a 401k system across the state of Illinois to all public employees was a political non-starter.
But think about it, because there's such a small percentage of state employees. What percentage of the population are state employees?
It's a remarkably small percentage.
3 or
I think it's
4%?
I think it's in that area, yes.
So 96% might say, hey, that's a swell idea. 4% say no. I don't know. I haven't taken many political science courses, but it would seem like there might be a constituency for that argument, right?
It would seem that there might be, but the reality is that in the state of Illinois, there is
Tough
not
to do.
a majority
Okay.
constituency for that. That's
But
right.
the second thing, we in America believe in redemption and second chances. So the governor has a second chance, and J.B. Pritzker has a first chance. Because if either of them become convinced of what I just said, and I'm not partial, I'm just sitting here like an analyst trying to figure this thing out with my good friend, David Greising. And it seems like you might want to try that, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, because stop digging. It doesn't solve your unfunded pension issue. What people say that's 130 billion or 250 billion. But at least that number doesn't get larger, which it has been getting larger over the last 3 years because we've been continuing. Okay.
Right.
But that would be a good discussion to have, wouldn't it?
Well, it's a discussion, as you noted, it's a discussion that has been held. The governor did talk about it when he first ran.
Oh, no, but I want the governor to sit down with JB and you or me or Andy or Marianne Aaron or somebody, and I think we should have one person, none of these 5 people doing, just assign it to one person. Because that person can then, if somebody's dodging, he or she can say they're dodging.
Drill down on the question.
So
Yeah,
one
that's a
for
good-
one
that's
of
a
the
good
10
approach.
debates, another for the other, and guaranteed balance. Find the 10 most balanced, thoughtful people. And then we do that. We get the governor and we get JB, and they go at it, and people learn, and they know something.
It'll be interesting. Whether or not you could get them to cooperate, to participate in something like that is a completely different
I
question.
am completely
But
idealistic, aren't
we're all
you?
dreamers, right? We're all dreamers. You've got to have that dreamer in you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got that. On education, there's all this stuff from the right, some would say even more center-right. We need some competition in education. Because if you have the local school and kids sort of have to go there, now they really, in CPS, there are a lot of choices in, I think a majority of kids may go to schools outside their neighborhood, but it's a public school. The difference, and I mean, it's not even a charter school. It's a traditional neighborhood school. So many people would say, you're going from one bad choice to another. Or the innovation, the different way of doing things might be in charters, but it might be in others. Can we break out of that? Should we? Well, you worry.
Break out of the current
Here,
combination of.
Let me take advantage of your expertise. You were not just a columnist and a journalist. Most of your life has been in business journalism, right?
That's correct.
You would understand the power of competition.
I understand the power of competition. Are you guiding us toward a discussion of school vouchers?
I'm asking you, because we're only going to have about a minute here. We don't have the time to do
okay.
it. Just in a minute, is competition a good thing in general? Might it be good in education? And should we ask Rauner and JB to take that as part of their discussion of education?
I think vouchers is always an interesting discussion. The record in Milwaukee, which has the largest running voucher program in the country, is that when the number of voucher students in any given school is anywhere below about 30%, you do see an improvement in their performance. When the percentage gets higher than that, they perform pretty much at the same level as their peers
What's the
in regular
percentage?
schools.
What's 30% mean?
Roughly about a third of the student body under vouchers, so long as the number stays below that.
Oh,
at
so
any given
30% of the
school.
total is in vouchers.
If 30% of the total number
Is
of
30
students in any
is-
given school.
So if the number is 30% or less, there's improvement. Once the vouchers become more than 30%,
of the private
Of
school
the-
population, then performance is more or less the same.
The
What
private
is
school, you mean
interesting,
of the
though-
public school population, don't you mean? Or?
No, this is these are voucher students in a private school. Their performance up to a
I'm just kind of missing it. So we have about 380,000 kids in CPS, maybe 390,000. So what does that mean for CPS? Because we have zero vouchers there now.
Here's the problem with when vouchers do take root. As we've seen, the Milwaukee case shows that if you look at a graph that shows the decline in the public school population in Milwaukee and the rise in the private school population, it's basically every student that goes to a private school with a voucher leaves the public school system. And so that the argument that the public school system suffers because when money follows the student, that money leaves the school system when they leave
but
those
their
public
costs
schools.
go down.
So you wind up with
Hold up,
schools that are losing funding with each
No,
student that
but
leaves.
let's say on average in CPS, we spend about 15,000, that's what it is, 15,000 per kid per year. Because the budget is about $6 billion. The number of students is a little less than 400,000. Call it 400,000, divide 400,000 into $6 billion, you get 15K per year. So when each of those kids goes out, the cost, which we're spending, $15 billion, which includes federal funds, state funds, local funds, that cost should go down substantially, maybe even 15,000, and yet they don't get to take usually all of it. They may get 6,000 for a voucher, maybe 8,000. So if the cost is 15, and they don't take 15, they only take 8, it seems like maybe they're better off because everybody else has their pro rata share, and now they got 7 in the example I gave.
Well,
Extra to be divided among everybody else. So,
but what you're not looking at is the cost of the physical plant of the building, which doesn't change at
well,
all. There
over
are
time
certain
it
costs
will,
that
right.
don't change.
As you know, fixed costs don't change immediately, but in the long run, every cost is a variable cost. Because in the long run, we have to replace the buildings. So there are no fixed costs in the long run.
Or you end up closing neighborhood schools, which we've already seen some of that
See,
happening.
this is good.
Right.
My point is we can't discuss this all because we want to keep moving. This would be a good discussion to have by Rauner and JB. They may want to say charter schools. They may want to talk about virtual charter, homeschooling. JB may want to say we should have guaranteed increases in funding. That would be something else of a type of reform. In other words, let freedom reign. Let JB come up with his ideas, which may be different from vouchers. Rauner may have.
You know where you
Just
could
have
see
that
the biggest,
discussion.
you know where you could see the biggest impact right now today would be cleaning up the Chicago public school system. We've seen time after time evidence of inefficiency in that system that you could squeeze out. Set aside the bigger question of vouchers. Just run that system efficiently, and you make significant impact on costs and on the quality of
This
education.
is the benefit of having the University of Chicago here on the south side. Because the Chicago School of Economics, which really started in the 1920s and is almost approaching they didn't realize
Right.
this, their centenary, their
Right.
100-year anniversary. The benefit, they teach us is if you want to stop those inefficiencies, get competition.
Well,
Because if CPS can't manage to clean, the toilets, maybe if they had competition and those people could clean the toilets, maybe they would either start cleaning the toilets or they would lose funds that you talked about, and then they would figure out how to clean the toilets. Because how hard can it be to clean a toilet?
Right. So the godfather of school vouchers is Milton Friedman, and he, of course, spent a good part of his career at the University of
course.
Chicago. So
And he wrote about
that's an
this, yeah.
appropriate recognition
Okay.
of Friedman.
Okay.
The thing is that in the real world application, the effect has been that the school system does not adjust as quickly and efficiently as it might, and so the kids who are left behind in the public schools suffer as a result. Whether or not the longer-term vouchers are a greater good is a different question, but there's a kind of a transition problem.
There is a
that has not
contra
been
view
well
that
dealt
says that's
with.
not the case. It says the public schools get better as a result of the competition. It doesn't say every charter school is good, it doesn't say every voucher school is good, but there are data that suggest on average there's more good than bad. And if If you're at CPS and there are only 25 or 30% who are reading at grade level, why not take a chance? Are you afraid the number's going to go down to 15? Right. In other words, when it gets so bad, okay. But the point
I
again,
think we both agree that the CPS has some serious problems, and creative approaches to fixing those problems ought to be welcomed and tested against the track record that we've seen around the country. There's 8 or 9 states where there are vouchers already. So
there's there's evidence.
Right. So there is data out there.
And you know, I expect Rauner could learn a bit about this. I expect, and he does. I know he's talked about this kind of stuff even before he was governor. I know JB's a smart guy. For God's sakes, they named a law school after him. No, I mean, but I understand. JB is a smart guy. I've talked to him. So really, Greising and Berkowitz, that's nothing. What we want to see are Rauner and JB, Rauner and Pritzker, right?
Be great to hear them debate the voucher issue.
Okay,
sure.
So moving right along, we only got about 3 or 4 minutes. See, we do each of these things. We talk about the property taxes being high, and how high are they, and can you cap them, and what can you do, and is that affecting people leaving the state? Just today, we see people talking about for the last 4 years, Illinois is losing population. We know we're losing business. You could lead a discussion on what kind of factors would start attracting business as opposed to them leaving the state. Medicaid reform, Rauner has tried it, but not so much. And I haven't heard what JB has to say.
Well, JB wants to basically introduce an Illinois version of almost an Obamacare, like a Romney Care type, double down on
Obamacare, but more for the state.
Yeah, for the state. So
well, let the debate go on. Let JB go forth with that program.
I mean, he's looking toward almost a single payer type system.
So he wants to take it a little further than Obamacare.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it from some of what he said on the
campaign.
campaign.
So we should be having that discussion.
Mm-hmm. This is one of the areas of the biggest difference between these two candidates.
Right. So this is ripe for discussion. Pensions we've mentioned. We should have more discussion of that. Workers' comp reform has been talked about a lot, but not so. I would like to hear what JB has to say. I would like to hear what Rauner specifically. And both of you folks should be able to start coming up with specific legislation. It's about time for both of you. So, yeah, really, I mean, you've got staffs, you have thoughts.
Well,
let's get very specific.
One of the interesting things about a campaign like this is that Governor Rauner has been obligated to deliver a budget. People will question whether the budget is real or not. A lot of people think it's not very real. But Pritzker really, I mean, the political process does not force the candidate who's not in office to actually deliver a real budget. Pritzker has talking points out there, but we don't really know what he wants a progressive income tax, for example. Well, that would require a state constitutional amendment because we have a flat tax in this state.
That is the big discussion, right? And you're right. We only have a minute left, so they should really glom on that. Pritzker says he wants a progressive tax. There's a lot of logistics to go through. You might not be there till 2021, even
at the
if
very
you had it. But it's a
right.
big deal. It could be more revenue. It could drive people out of the state. Rauner might say, bring it on. Bring it on. That is, let's have that debate. Let's have these 10 discussions. They can go on around the state. Did I convince you? Would the BGA join in saying we should go out and talk to them? Andy, you and me, right?
It's something the BGA should be talking about. It's an interesting idea. I don't know if it's going to be one of our big agenda items for the year or not, but worth talking about.
I'm sure it will be. We got to go in like 10 seconds. So you just remember, you come back next week and every week, not to see Berkowitz. He's nothing, seriously. He's nothing. But to see people like David Greising, head of the BGA. And David, you must promise to come back because we're only halfway through the discussion.
Enjoyed this, Jeff. This is very interesting.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. All right.
And you come back to Public Affairs next week and every week.